Shout out to Shady Rays, today's sponsor for the podcast. I don't know how, but they are basically better quality than so many other expensive $200 sunglasses out there. I'm not exaggerating. They are every bit as premium as the expensive brands that are out there. And I don't have to stress about them. I literally wear these sunglasses everywhere I go. Maybe not everywhere, but I have them with me everywhere I go, in my coat pocket, on my dash in the car. If I'm driving out and I have the sun in my face, I need these bad boys. They're so good. And if I were to lose them, say I'm just hanging out at the ocean, they can replace them. If I lose them just walking around in the street, through the Lost and Broken Protection program that they have, they could absolutely replace them. They have over 300,000 5-star reviews, and millions of people have switched over to Shady Rays. Go to shadyrays.com and grab a pair today. We have teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Shadyrays.com and use the code SDP, and you can get 40% off 2 or more polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself these shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Shadyrays.com and use the code SDP for 40% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, we still don't know who is going to be the president of hockey operations and GM for the Leafs, but we do know who will be at the top of searching for those positions. Neil Glasberg, a player agent, also in charge of PBI Sports and Entertainment. That story caused a lot of waves this week. I understand that teams like Anaheim and Vancouver and Philadelphia have also done something like this, but I am curious about how this will go for the Leafs. What were your thoughts when you heard this story?
I should note he's a coaching agent, not a player agent. And I only say
coaching
that,
agent, excuse me.
But I only say
excuse
that
me.
Not to correct you, but because it would actually be illegal to be a player agent who does partake in the kind of search for an executive like he's taken on with the Leafs. Because he's a coaching agent, there's no rules against that. And, you know, I think quite honestly that it probably made more waves than was necessary. At the end of the day, you know, this is a hiring that the Leafs board, i.e. their ownership, and Keith Pelly will make. And there will be a lot of different voices involved in that. There'll be lawyers ultimately involved. There's a contract that needs to be signed. And, you know, I think before making those kind of decisions, they want to have comfort that they've considered other candidates, that they haven't narrowed in on 1 or 2 people that they, you know, initially are drawn to at the expense of missing something that could be sitting right in front of them. And so, while I'll acknowledge it's a little strange in this circumstance because Neil Glasberg has a business relationship with some of the people that the Leafs are going to talk to, including Sunny Mehta of the Panthers, who, you know, the Leafs do have permission to speak with already. You know, I don't know that. Look, the whole hockey world is full of conflict, we'll call it, because it's a very small kind of community the way it is. And so, you know, I don't see it as being problematic. I think really it's more information for the Leafs before they, you know, make what's obviously a huge decision for the organization. You know, I will tell you this too, Julian. 3 years ago when Kyle Dubas and the Leafs had their very public split, you know, there was a sense, I think, at the ownership level in Toronto that it wasn't a long enough search that produced Brad Treliving. Now, you know, at that time, remember, the Leafs were coming off a second round appearance in the playoffs. So it was later in the offseason. Obviously, there was some time pressures there to get someone in place by the time the draft came about and to be ready for free agency. But, you know, the only people I'm aware of that the Leafs spoke to at that time were obviously Brad Treliving and Marc Bergevin. There may have been another interview or two that I never heard about, but the point was it wasn't a lengthy process or didn't include a long list of candidates. And I think, you know, because of that situation in part, there's a little bit more emphasis this time on making sure they don't miss anything. And as I mentioned, they do have more time to sort of conduct the process because Brad Treliving ultimately left the organization at the end of March rather than the end of May. So long story short, you know, a little unusual because you're talking about someone who does have relationships with some of the people that ultimately he'll be put forward as candidates. But Neil Glassberg's job isn't to say, this is the guy you have to hire. And it's certainly not his job to make the decision on who they ultimately bring in.
For me, it's not so much the conflict of, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. That is intriguing enough to me, but it just feels like, and look, I'm not the expert in terms of finding who the right person for these particular positions should be, but I don't know. Sunny Mehta has popped up as like a big favorite. He seems like he checks off a lot of boxes of what this team might need. I just hope this doesn't turn into a whole thing where it's like, hey, you went through this whole search process and it turns out the guy that you should get is the guy everyone around this team has been saying you should get. But also, again, I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on every single possible candidate who should be at this position for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's just, if they're interested in someone who's data driven, his name has popped up in recent weeks, in recent days, I should say, for that opportunity. He does make a lot of sense, it seems.
He does. And look, though, I mean, to me, what's the harm in getting more information, right? What's the harm? I would expect when Keith Pelly is going through this process, naturally, he's got a lot of contacts within the sports world, not just the hockey world. You can be sure he's calling people he trusts in general and saying, hey, what do you think of candidate A? What do you think, who are we missing? I think naturally people lean on their network to seek out these hires, honestly, in any field. I don't think this is just a hockey or management search in the NHL type of conversation. What I see here with Neil Glassberg, I mean, Neil's really well known in Toronto, I should say, and probably more broadly in the hockey world, but, he has represented coaches for a long time. He's more recently got into the executive searches, but, he's someone I bump into at the rink 10 times a year at least, where he's, at Scotiabank Arena typically to see clients or what have you. Through town. So, he's part of the kind of people that I think the Leafs should be calling, honestly, and beyond him as well, in looking for, leads for who makes sense. I mean, quite honestly, when I started this podcast, I called a few people that I trust in the industry and said, hey, who are some younger people in the industry I might not know? That I should be thinking about doing a podcast with. That's partly how
you had a search firm for this.
It wasn't a search firm. I didn't pay anyone. I guess maybe I paid in a round of beer somewhere along the line, but in part that led to you and I doing a podcast together. Like that's awesome. That kind of conversation, specifically with Arpin Basu in Montreal, who told me, hey, there's this young guy in Montreal who's kicking ass and taking names. He's got a great attitude.
Thank you, Arpin. Arpin, as much as, look, I genuinely love Arpin. I know if he ever hears this, his head is just going to multiply.
Well, he must know this. I'm sure he remembers that conversation. I mean, the point is,
he absolutely remembers that conversation.
I think it's a prudent way to do business, honestly. So I don't have the issue with hiring Neil. Now, finding the right candidate's a different matter altogether. And, the Leafs have competition with Sunny Mehta too, potentially. And I don't say competition that they have to, I'm not like trying to frame it that they have to go hire him today because it could happen. But, the New Jersey Devils, where Sunny has worked previously, they also have permission to speak to him about their GM opening after, Tom Fitzgerald departed the organization this week. So, Sunny has lived in Jersey, as I mentioned, has worked for David Blitzer and Josh Harris before, the Devils owners. And they're another organization that I think it's well understood. They're looking for someone who's, well-versed in analytics and is taking that kind of bent towards decision-making moving forward. So, it's not even a slam dunk. It's not a slam dunk. The Leafs will offer Sunny Mehta a job. It's not a slam dunk. We'll see what happens because there's another team involved. And I think from the Leafs end of things, the one thing you have to work through that they don't still have clarity on is, are they hiring a president at the same time? Are you hiring a president to hire the GM? I mean, typically you want top down, you want to create a top down structure where you hire a senior person who hires the person below them, who hires the person below them, and everybody's in alignment. How is this all going to work? Because I think the only issue that you would probably have with Sunny Mehta or anyone else that's in this position is that, he's not done it before at the GM level. And it's one thing to build the roster. That's an obvious, duty of the GM, but there's a lot of other things that happen. And not everyone who has an assistant GM title, as Sunny has in Florida for the last few seasons, gets full full view into those things, right? They don't always know what their boss is up to. There's probably a lot of aspects of the job, that I just think a first timer you would expect would have to grow into. Even the public facing aspects in a city like Toronto, where there's obviously pretty heavy media and fan presence around the team and a lot of interest in what goes on. I think there's a lot to consider about what makes sense for the best structure. I've heard, in talking to people all over the industry in the last week, I've heard no concerns about him, very bright guy and someone that's very well thought of in the community around the NHL. But, I think we could acknowledge if they were just to hire him only as GM and have no one above him, that might not be the right position for him to thrive either. In fact, it reminds me of a hire a long time ago. Get down for story time with CJ, but the Leafs hired John Ferguson Jr. after hiring a search firm many years ago for a GM opening after Pat Quinn was stepping out of the job. They'd had a lot of success at that time under Quinn. I believe JFJ was 36 or 37 when the Leafs hired him, but was, an up and coming executive. He'd worked in St. Louis. And it didn't end up being a great fit. And John Ferguson Jr. has worked in the NHL ever since he left Toronto. He's never been a GM again, but he's had prominent roles for 20 straight years beyond that. He still had a great career, but, I wonder if on some level, if they had a better insulated him at the time, put him in a position for longer success in that job. I mean, point being, I think this is all what has to be worked through by Pelly and the ownership group there. And, I think because of the previous experience with the Tree Living hiring in 2023, I don't think this is a one or two candidates get interviewed and one of them gets chosen kind of circumstance. I really believe they're at least going to extend the net beyond two or three people and considered lots of options. And that's partially why you have Neil Glassberg, as someone who's is at least coming up and curating a list and vetting candidates for you of possible people to consider.
The Leafs shouldn't be afraid, and not saying that they are. They shouldn't be afraid of having a first-timer as a GM. I do agree with you. If you're going to have that structure, though, you have someone experienced above him who that GM could always lean on for guidance, which kind of leads to my next question. I'm very curious.
Maybe advisors. I've thought about this because...
Sure, that too.
I was down in Florida the last 2 years when they won the Stanley Cup and saw people like Rick Dudley on the ice. He's not front and center with the Panthers, but he's been part of... the advisory team that Bill Zito works with, Les Jackson, who is a GM in Dallas, but a longtime scout around the league, has been part
Dudley
of their
was in
staff.
the Canadiens organization once upon a time.
Yeah, and he's been around forever. I mean, and is no one hustles harder than Rick Dudley. I mean, in terms of seeing games and really having a good feel for how to do things. Paul Fenton's part of the Panthers front office. Paul Krapelka. I mean, the point is they have a lot of people that aren't front and center that I think help. That they can be staff that can, Bill Zito and others can bounce ideas off of when they're making decisions on acquisitions. And let's face it, the reason that I've been in Florida for the last two Stanley Cup finals is because the Panthers have made a lot of good personnel decisions, right? If you look at everything that's happened since Zito was hired, I mean, they've been on an all-time heater of winning trades, even just finding useful players on waivers, signing good contracts. I know that there's some other factors that go into that, but they've done the sort of things that definitely need to happen in a place like Toronto for this to have any chance to turn around in the way the organization wants. So, I don't know that the structure has to be president GM if it's someone like Sunny Mehta in that position. But I do think that they have to make sure they surround him with the right staff. Because one feeling I had this year, quite honestly, being around the Leafs a fair bit, is after Brendan Shanahan was shown the door in May, it just felt like, I think even I probably misread how significant that would be just from a day-to-day workflow, standpoint for the organization. And things have felt a little less stable ever since he's been gone. And obviously a lot of things have gone wrong for this team. And so I think they have to try to reinforce some stability, and there's probably more than one way to do that. And that's, what they're trying to do right now.
Is there a name that you, maybe not necessarily you would like to see, but names that come to mind who might be good fits for that type of role just above a first-time GM? Well,
look, the talk about Mike Gillis is real. The Leafs have interest in him, and I believe there's already been a conversation between Gillis and Pelly. I think there's another one that's coming up here. So that he makes sense. I mean, look, what's the negatives there? Or the perceived negatives would be that he hasn't worked in the league in 12 years. I think that's obviously a fair point, but he's also extremely, was a longtime agent, knows a lot of people in the game. That those relationships persist. He had experience building the Canucks up from a place where they were adrift to where they got within one win of the Stanley Cup in 2011. So he's worked in a market like Toronto. He's made the kind of decisions the GM would make. I think he makes sense. But, you've also heard some other veterans that have been around the industry. I mean, guys like a Dean Lombardi, Peter Chiarelli. I mean, I don't know what their desires are. I'm not saying that they necessarily want to just be in the background as advisors, but I think you really have to look at, those with experience that are out there. I mean, Ron Francis just parted ways with the Seattle Kraken. Maybe you're not hiring him in a frontline role. But, Hockey Hall of Famer as a player, longtime experience as an executive. I know it didn't go particularly well in Seattle in terms of that organization having the early success they wanted, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't have him on speed dial when you're working through decisions, and that he wouldn't have a helpful hand in that. I mean, Bob Gainey, I think is out there. I mean, I would be open-minded to all kinds of things. Like, I don't think it has to be, I think someone older who doesn't want to be on the road all the time could be helpful too. It's really about finding the right mix of personalities and someone that you're comfortable with. So, I'm obviously throwing a ton of names at you there, but I think that all of those people would deserve a call and see where they're at. What do they want to do? Could this be a fit? Because, ultimately the Leafs, like we can like handicap press conferences and we can, talk about the Neil Glassbergs till we're blue in the face. At the end of the day, they just need to make some good decisions. I mean, that's all this comes down to. I mean, you cut out all the noise. If they hire the right people and let them do their jobs and those people make good personnel decisions, then, ultimately I think the Leafs will get somewhere where they're happy again. If the things get in the way, if they put the wrong person in place or people in place, if they continue to lose trades and sign, inefficient contracts and all those things, well then, this is headed for another even bigger blow up. So, this is it really is a critical juncture for this team and for the organization. And, I still personally think there's a path back to competitiveness. I think I'm going to need some convincing the path back to contender status. Probably needs a little bit more road, but it starts with the hirings they're about to make.
And if they can find a way to get that top 5 pick, which that's still up in the air with a handful of games to go.
I mean, this is going to go down as a what if, because if you look at the standings, and right now the Leafs, we're recording on Thursday morning, they play in Long Island or on Long Island on Thursday night. One of 4 games they have remaining. Like, even if they go 0-4, I don't think they're getting to a bottom 5 spot. But if you look at some of the extra points they've picked up in the last stretch of games and things like that, I mean, they really weren't far off, but organizationally, they were just against this. I understand it publicly. Like, I don't expect anyone to come out and say we're tanking, but I think with a little more direction and thought about how they wanted to approach the last 6 weeks of the season, they could have got to a spot where at least their lottery odds were a little better than they're going to be when it gets to May 5th and that drawing happens. And, they had a better chance. Now, that being said, last year, the Utah Mammoth moved up from 14 to number 4 because they won the second lottery. The Islanders moved up 9 spots from, 10th worst odds to pick number 1. So, maybe there's no advantage there's no guaranteed advantage by finishing bottom 5, but, the Leafs have put themselves in a position, in my view, where they're going to have to win either the first or second pick, or else they're given 6, 7, 8, whatever it ends up being, to Boston.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough situation. I'm telling you, that April 15 game against Ottawa, maybe that means something.
You've been hyping this game.
I've been hyping this game.
It's within view now, so I mean,
yep.
Even the Sens have been winning more, so it doesn't feel like it's. I mean, look, it's probably going to be consequential. Who am I kidding? But it doesn't look like the Sens are necessarily going to have to win it. But let's see.
It depends
we
what
got a
they do
big weekend action ahead here.
Oh, yeah. Thursday, they got the Panthers, then they got the Islanders and the Devils this weekend, and then they have that April 15 game. But there's a world where they win Thursday and they win Saturday and or Sunday. And you're right. That April 15 game is moot. But at least I was pretty close to my prediction. I was close. I see it as a win regardless. Who cares?
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, it will matter, I would think, for the Leafs at minimum, because it's probably at that point, it's the difference of one spot up or down, wherever they're at. But, it's so close. There's so many teams bunched around them with points. I mean, if they win that game or not will probably affect where their final ranking is for sure.
By the way, we did mention Ron Francis. He will step down at season's end as president of hockey operations in Seattle. He was the team's first GM. What were your thoughts on that piece of news coming out on Wednesday? Well,
they don't intend to replace him, so I think it just tells you they're sort of turning the page on that era. This started last year. He had been the general manager, and then Jason Botterill moved up to that seat last offseason. And, look, I think it comes down to the fact that they haven't built quite what they want yet in Seattle. I mean, that much is clear. They qualified for the playoffs in their second season, got to the second round, surprised Colorado in round one that year. And then it's been kind of a slow grind. And I think in some ways you can trace it all the way back to the decisions they made or didn't make at the expansion draft. But, Vegas did them no favors, because Vegas won their expansion draft to such a degree that I think, the league got wise to how to better manage, the teams got wise about how to better manage their protected lists and not leverage themselves the way a lot of teams did with Vegas by making trades at the expansion draft. And so, I mean, I think realistically, expansion teams, it is a tough go. It's tough to start from scratch and build up. So, I can understand the need or the desire for kind of new vision, turn the page on that era. Ron Francis worked for 7 years in Seattle because he was there right from the beginning of the idea of the team, before they had a name, before they had, jerseys, before they did that expansion draft. And they're kind of heading in another direction, but I don't really have any deep thoughts about it other than if you don't win, I mean, it's hard to stick around, right? In any situation. I mean, and it's been kind of a tumultuous couple weeks in the league. We're seeing that, right? The head coach is getting fired. I mean, it's a surprise at this late stage of the season the way it has, but now, seeing Fitzgerald out, obviously the plans for succession in Nashville, the Leafs and Brad Treliving parting ways. I mean, and it might not end there. Like, it feels like there's this kind of like a fault line running under the league right now. And there's a little bit of I don't know if I can call it a full earthquake, but there's at least some tremors out there that are shaking the foundation under these teams, and we're seeing some changes as a result.
Yeah. Well, first off, with the Kraken, you talk about losing. This is a team with one win in their last 10 games, falling further and further down in that chase for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. Like, it's not happening for them this year. A tough go for Seattle.
And it was there for them.
They might have had a chance
until that 10-game stretch, right? They were right there. And I think ultimately they don't have enough good players. They have some free agent decisions to come this summer. But I do think Vegas, we can't expect everyone to be like Vegas is 1 in a million. If the league ultimately goes to 34 teams and we see 2 more expansion teams, like, I would say have reasonable expectations for what the first 5 years of those franchises will be. I mean, the league is not set up it's hard to make the playoffs, right? Half the teams do and half the teams don't under the current alignment. And, Seattle's not awful, but they certainly haven't got to where we call them good. They are kind of mid, right? They haven't been bad enough to be drafting 1, 2, or 3. Now, maybe they get some luck. Maybe they're the team that gets the ping pong balls bouncing their way May 5th, and that can help change things for them, getting, higher end young talent into their organization. But, I just think it takes time sometimes, and it's not a sexy take. It's not what anyone wants to hear, but look what's happening in Buffalo right now. That took the most time of all. And when it breaks and when you're ready to win, I mean, that city's alive. I mean, they're parking wagons outside the building. They're still feeling so good these days.
No one circles the wagons. That's the line, right? No one circles the wagons on Buffalo. Chris Berman.
Oh,
ESPN.
I don't know.
Monday Night Countdown.
I believe you.
You don't know that? Come on.
I believe you, but I don't know. I know who Chris Berman is, obviously, but I don't remember that line.
All right. Anyway. Also, just randomly coming into my head, on Seattle putting their hand up for the ping pong balls for the draft lottery. Nothing would make me laugh harder in a year where the Vancouver Canucks have assured themselves a top 3 pick. Calgary Flames, obviously they've found ways to win games, but they obviously wanted to. We just talked about Toronto. Nothing would make me laugh more than 3 Canadian teams having a legitimate chance at a number 1 overall pick. And then Seattle, of all teams, in that mushy middle, ends up beating them out for it, or however they're stacked up for the odds, or whatever.
It could happen. That's the way it
can easily happen.
When you finish dead last, you're more likely to have the 3rd pick than the 1st or 2nd pick. So, I mean, that's the league is that's been their sort of address to tanking. I mean, and I think it does work. I mean, last year, San Jose had the best odds going in the draft lottery. They dropped 1 spot because Utah could only jump up 10. So even though they lost both lotteries, they fell to number 2. But, the odds, I hate to tell you, Vancouver, but the odds, by the math, you're more likely to be picking 3rd than anywhere else. 3rd's still pretty good, though.
Keaton Verhoff is good.
Yeah, or Chase Reed. I mean, there's definitely, it seems like there's like 4 to 5 players that people are pretty excited about at the top of this draft. So, at worst, you're still landing in that spot where you're getting one of those guys.
Guys, it's time to put away the heavy layers. No more winter clothes, no more winter jackets, puffer vests, and all that. It's time for breathable, durable clothes that will move with you and keep up with you at every step of the way. And that's where Mack Weldon and their Ace collection comes in. They have updated closet staples like stretch twill chinos that go with everything, as well as button-ups. We've seen CJ with the red quarter zip that looks really good on him. He was wearing it during Easter weekend. Absolutely spectacular stuff from Mack Weldon. Discover upgraded basics, fresh styles at MackWeldon.com. Plus get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with the code CJ. That's MackWeldon.com with the code CJ. MackWeldon.com, and you can get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with the promo code CJ. Before I get to Alexander Ovechkin, a thought on New Jersey. I know you might not have too deep a thought, but also Tom Fitzgerald being out as GM for New Jersey and why it could happen now, and also what could be next for Sheldon Keefe.
Well, it was time there, right? And this team in 2022-23 set a franchise record, 112 points, beat the Rangers in round 1, got beat by Carolina in round 2, but seemed to be on their way. That was done with a pretty young core, and you look at the 3 years since, and they missed the playoffs the following season. Last year they were back in, but lost in round 1 pretty quickly to Carolina, and they're going to be out again this year. When you don't grow on that promise, I mean, this is the outcome. If you look closely at the statement the Devils put out this week, Julian, this really was, I think, kind of a mutual sort of parting. Tom Fitzgerald has been mentioned pretty prominently, and certainly whispers out there that he's in the mix to wind up with one of the jobs or a job in Nashville, depending what the Predators do at their open spot. Former player in Nashville. And I think, one thing that the Preds have been looking for is someone with some experience to be brought into that front office. So, Tom Fitzgerald ticks some of those boxes. And, ultimately though, it's the price of not winning, not moving forward. At the time when the whole Quinn Hughes thing happened and he ends up in Minnesota, somewhat surprisingly in December, the Devils really felt like they didn't have the pieces that could beat the offer the Wild put on the table. And look, that may be the case, but I think that was a big moment because it had been so widely believed that Quinn wanted to go there and play with his 2 younger brothers, Jack and Luke Hughes. Obviously a game breaking type of talent. And, Devils weren't able to get that done. And then there's a lot of pressure on Tom Fitzgerald after that point. And, he was hamstrung, as a lot of teams are, by having a lot of no movement clauses. It was hard to kind of make other moves beyond that as a trade deadline approach. He did trade Andre Palat to the Islanders, but, wasn't able to get maybe as much business done as he wanted. And it's an ownership group that's involved and, expects results. That was, you're still a team and there's a big decision pending here, but Nico Hischier is still only 27. Jack Hughes is 25. Hughes has been playing great of late. He's been putting up a lot of points and probably gotten a little boost after his golden turn and the golden goal at the Olympics in Milan. And so, I think this is a highly desirable job because of what's there. Like Tom Fitzgerald is not leaving the cupboards bare. They have Simon Nemec and, really a roster that I think can be turned into something promising. And so we'll see where they end up. And I think as for Keefe, it's sort of similar to Craig Berube in Toronto right now. I mean, it will depend on who's hired, what that person's view is. I will say typically that the head coach doesn't get tossed aside immediately when a new GM gets hired. I think the GM usually wants to wait some time before firing that bullet, but B, just get a better sense of the organization, where things are at. We saw this with Matthew Darche, took over the Islanders last year and, saw 78 games of Patrick Roy and then piped them and brought in Pete DeBoer, who makes his debut Thursday night behind the Islanders bench. So, I'm not offering a prediction, but I'm just merely noting that if you look historically, guys like Keefe or Berube, could still, while they're clearly not on solid ground, could still end up staying where they are, depending on who's hired and the view of that person above them to be the next GM or president of hockey ops or whatever titles being tossed around in these hirings.
Wonder if this is the summer where New Jersey tries to really shake things up with some kind of trade. The fact that you lose out on a Quinn Hughes, for example, maybe you have an appetite to do something big.
Well, Hischier's 1 year from free agency, right?
Right. So like that's what I'm kind of hinting at. Like, is if you are not choosing to extend Nico Hischier for whatever reason, that is your centerpiece in a trade if you want to do it.
Well, and I think it's what he wants. This is the all of the leverage is shifted to the player in this circumstance. And so, I think probably the first order of business from a roster standpoint is, for the new leader in New Jersey to get a sense where that stands. Is Hischier open to an extension? What's it going to cost? Either get that done or you're trading him. I don't imagine they would go into a lame duck year with him. I mean, it doesn't feel like that's going to be the new trend around the league. I mean, when you look at all the pending UFAs to come, and that includes guys like Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes might be the exception because he just arrived in Minnesota. He's only got 1 year, but Cale Makar is going to be 1 year from UFA this summer. I would expect, I just expect the Avalanche to sign him. I don't have any reason to believe he wants to leave or wants to test the market, but it sort of feels like for all the players that could be 2027 UFAs, 2026 summer is huge. You're either signing an extension then, or we're talking about a trade. And then I'd say the same for the 2028 guys, which, includes McDavid and Matthews and a bunch of others. So,
let's not jump ahead.
Well, I'm just saying the new way of things, though, it doesn't seem like we're going to see as many players, the top players, get to UFA, but it sort of what their UFA window is the year before they can hit the market. It's either a trade or sign scenario.
Considering how these moves have been flying fast and furious, if there was a way some of those extensions could have been done now, I'm sure maybe some of those players would have done that too, instead of waiting for July 1st.
Right. So I just think the Hischier decision is much sooner than we think, because, he's either signing in New Jersey this summer. It doesn't have to be on July 1st. It could be July 5th or August 12th or whatever day he wants. But I think it has to be moving towards a signing, or, he's likely being dealt. And obviously, because it's a weak free agent class, center's a premium position, and there's a lot of notable teams out there that are looking for, a frontline kind of player like Hischier would be. I mean, he would have huge value as a trade piece if that's the way this ends up breaking.
Absolutely. We should go to Alexander Ovechkin, unless there's any other name percolating in your brain for a GM job. Like, it's funny, when I was thinking of Sunny Mehta, he's not the only person from Florida who might be looking for a job. Brett Peterson is also out there too, the AGM of the Panthers, who's going to be in charge of Team USA. I just think he's just worth mentioning, period. But
he was part of the. It has been part of the Nashville process, which they've been working through. They talked to a lot of assistant GMs throughout the league. Scott White from Dallas, Bill Scott from the Edmonton Oilers. Among those that have had meetings with the Predators. And Brett Peterson. Look, I mean, when you're part of a winning organization, people want to buy that, right? Where did Matthew Darche come from? He worked at the right hand of Julian Brisebois in Tampa for years. He won 2 Stanley Cups with the Lightning, and that helped, that experience helped him parlay that into, the opportunity to be the GM with the Islanders. I would expect with the success of the Panthers going to the last 3 Stanley Cup finals, it only makes sense to me that you'd be trying to find the brightest and best minds in their organization to, help lead yours. I mean, this is a bunch of years ago now, but when, Tom Glardy bought the Dallas Stars at the time, the Detroit Red Wings were one of the powers in the league. What did he do? He looked at, hey, who could I get out of Detroit that's doing a great job there? He hired Jim Nill, and the rest is history. The Stars have been a pretty top level team most of the years he's owned that team. Obviously, they're in a Stanley Cup contention window now and have been to 3 straight conference finals. And they've had a ton of stability with Jim Nill and everyone that he's built around him in that organization. So I think it's a logical place for teams to land. And when an organization has success, everyone looks better, and everyone, I think is learning something too. I mean, everyone's looking to bring that culture. And Brett Peterson, you're right. He's had Team USA experience in addition to a number of years now as the assistant GM in Florida. And wouldn't surprise me at all to see him get a job at some point, whether it's in this round of hirings or, somewhere else down the line as a GM.
Yeah. And considering the amount of phone calls that need to be made by these teams, who knows? Maybe you get a call.
No.
To be a part of a front office.
No. I can't even pretend about that. I mean,
I'm just messing around.
Yeah, but I think I found my calling. If that makes
That's
sense.
good.
I don't have eyes.
That's good.
I don't have eyes on other things.
You want no part of an NHL front office, to be clear. You want no part of an NHL front office.
I didn't say I would want no part of it, but I'm realistic about where my skills and strengths lie and my experience level and all those things.
Okay, well, if Paul Bissonnette is at plus 10,000 for the Leafs GM job, I think you have better odds, personally. That's just me.
Biz knows a lot of people in the industry. I mean, I'm not
you
here
too.
I'm not here to drag anyone down.
All right, good call. Anyway, Alexander Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals played against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday night in Toronto. Earlier in the day, he sat down with John Walton from the Monumental Sports Network in Washington to say that he's not going to make a decision about his future until the summer. But I don't know. This is just me speaking personally. I could totally see a world where Alexander Ovechkin just wants it all to be quiet, and then he takes his time in the summer and he says, you know what? My time in the NHL is over. And then maybe there's a later date where the Washington Capitals could bring him back and they celebrate him. I don't know. I mean, I would love to see a retirement tour for him, but I'm also bracing myself for the fact that we may have just seen Alexander Ovechkin play against the Canadian team for the final time in his NHL career. What do you think about that?
Well, it's not an easy decision, right? And so
no.
If anyone knows what's going to happen, it's only 1 or 2 or 3 people, and it's Ovechkin and those closest to him. And it wouldn't surprise me if he hasn't made the call yet, because it's obviously the end of a career and you can't get it back, all those types of things. But, he's clearly slowed down. He's clearly a specialty type of player, almost like a DH in baseball or, just in terms of the way they have to deploy him. But that being said, he still, as of this moment, has scored 31 goals this season, is the leading point getter on the Washington Capitals. Like, he's still a contributing member of the team. And we know how much this team means to him. Like, he's the leader. And so I think it's a lot, honestly, Julian, I think it's a lot to be weighed against each other, because I think when you've been as great as Ovechkin was at his peak, it gets harder and harder and harder to become merely average. Wayne Gretzky, I remember, saying he had 9 goals in his final season in 98-99 with the Rangers. And he said, I used to tell my kids, like, nine goals used to be a good weekend in the league. So like, I think for him, it became harder to, physically, just the challenges of the sport, obviously, but then to not be at the top. And so Ovechkin obviously must feel that slipping, and yet he's still producing at a way that we would say, yeah, like if he was 10 years younger and he was somewhere else and he didn't have his name, we'd be like, oh yeah, that 31 goal, 60 point forward. Like it was pretty good. He's attractive in free agency, right? Like that, he's going to get paid. But, but that isn't Ovechkin, and he's going to be a year older next year. And I think it's harder and harder and harder to prepare the body and mind to play. And so my honest belief is he hasn't made the call yet, even to himself. I had the chance to speak to a couple Capitals players sort of off camera, off record, when they came through Toronto. They definitely don't know. Like one of them told me like, we are all over him, like privately, like what's going on? Give us the scoop. What's happening? And he's not revealing to them. Obviously the organization doesn't know. What I can tell you is they did bring extra folks on the road for the game in Toronto. I think they're documenting it sort of behind the scenes just in case, which, I think it's a sensible way to do. When you don't know for sure he's back, you have to treat these last games of this season like it could be the end. And so, the Capitals are at least preparing for that possibility. And just seeing, the way Ovechkin came out on Wednesday morning, took kind of a long stretch, looked around. I don't know. He's giving off a lot of vibes to me like it could be the end. And when we talk about retirement tours, he had it last year, right? Like that goal chase was a massive and fully deserved, but it's a massive celebration of this guy's career, of his talents.
That's a fair point.
And, there was a lot of eyeballs on that. There's a lot of questions. It was a huge buildup and he got it done. Like, I feel like he doesn't need as much as he's a great personality. He's never been afraid of the cameras. He's not like, I think he's been a great spokesman for the game and continues to be. I don't know that he needs that kind of send off because he's already sort of had it. Like eventually it might feel like, we've all done this already. So if I had to guess, and it is purely guess, I'm siding with you. I think this is the end for him this season. But I certainly am not taking that to the bank. And look, I really don't believe he knows. It's entirely possible he's even thinking that right now. And then, the season ends and he takes 2 weeks and goes on vacation and swims in a pool or does whatever he does to relax, swings a golf club. And then he does that for a little while. And he's like, you know what? I want to be back. What's very clear is the Capitals are not pressuring him. Like they've said that they trust his judgment, that whatever he says is what's going to be. I mean, obviously if he wants to come back, they got to work out a contract and those sorts of things. But, I don't get the feeling he's being pushed out the door or anything of that manner. But yeah, it's a unique one, but I do think when he retires, he's not going to want to do I'm coming back for 1 year and it's only 1 year and everybody's having ceremonies around the league and shaking his hand. And, I don't know if you noticed too, he's been like swapping jerseys with a lot of captains around the league and stuff like this. Like just, and I know he's a huge collector and he actually wants to open like a museum with all the sticks he's gotten over the years and all that stuff. But like, so there could be other factors at play there, but it's given off the vibes that this is the end. And we'll see. I mean, pretty cool home and home with Pittsburgh this weekend. I'll be curious to see.
That's what I was going to turn the attention to. Just banging the drums, sounding like a broken record. A home and home against your biggest rival in the NHL. With respect to the game on the 14th against the Columbus Blue Jackets, that is a crazy way. If you were to say, you know what, it's over for me
too, man.
That's what I'm saying. I get it. He's going to go play that game, but those two games being at the end of the regular season and what could be your final year in the NHL, like, wow, chef's kiss. Love it.
And the odds are stacked heavily against them, but they're still alive in the playoff race. If they win their remaining games, they've got a chance. Again, I'm not mathematically, it's a long shot, but that's the other part of this that makes it a little different. Like Gretzky's Rangers were well into the playoffs in 98, 99 when he kind of did his late retirement ceremony, and I think that may or may not be the case for the Capital. Like they might not be eliminated going to that game in Columbus. And so, they might have to win there. I'll be curious to see what kind of reception he gets in Pittsburgh. I think it'll be pretty big, even though, there was a time that was a fiery, white hot rivalry. Obviously they played in the playoffs a whole whack of times. And there used to be kind of almost a turf war, like our Crosby versus your Ovechkin. I mean, over the years that softened. I think it's far more mutual respect by everyone involved. I think the Penguins appreciate even that they had that rivalry with the Capitals and fans will as well. And so I think it'll be a special scene, the game specifically in Pittsburgh. And then obviously when the Capitals are at home, it's their last, that could be Ovechkin's last ever home game, potentially. If they don't make the playoffs, that could be it. So it's going to be a pretty electric weekend around Ovechkin. And then, I think we're gonna have to wait some time. I don't see this being announced next week or 2 weeks from now. I think truly he's going to take that time away and then, make a decision on his future.
Even if we don't know, I just hope that in that home and home, just there's some kind of like cool moment where even if we don't know if he's going to end his career, it gets acknowledged in some way. Like there's like a moment.
Oh, there will be.
Sydney
Whether it's
there absolutely will be.
I was going to say
There
whether
has to
it's
be.
orchestrated formally by the clubs. I mean, I think Washington naturally will do something at home. The question is, what does Pittsburgh do? But even if I think it'll happen on 's own, if not, like there'll be probably a TV timeout thing, honestly, in Pittsburgh. Like it would not surprise me. I mean, I think, so you're defined by your greatness as a player, but he's been with one team and they were the rival of this other team. Like it's been such a perfect foil kind of to Crosby over 21 years in the league. I think the Penguins will tip a cap formally to him. That's just my gut.
All right. We'll see how it plays out this weekend. Very quickly, Connor McDavid scoring 5 points yesterday against the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, the Oilers looking to do everything they can to win the Pacific Division. Did you watch any of the game, any of the highlights?
Yeah, he's in pole position to win the Art Ross Trophy now. He's played one more game than Kucherov, 2 more games than McKinnon. So they have an extra shot at him, but those guys, he just put a 5 spot on them. So I think McDavid's put himself in a spot where I'm thinking he's likely to win another scoring title. He's got to 47 goals as well. So he's got a shot at his second 50-goal season. I mean, he's such a freak that his one other 50-goal season was a 64-goal season. But a chance to hit 50 again, I wonder if he gets there. The Oilers, I mean, I feel like they give you the best of both worlds, right? They had that wild game in Utah. They lost this week. Came back and had a really limiting effort in winning over the Sharks. The Sharks didn't get much going offensively. McDavid has the hat trick and 5 points. The calendar's flipping to playoff season. I just think the Oilers are going to find another level. I really do. Plus, as we've mapped out, that they have kind of a more favorable potential road available to them. But, the same stands for the Golden Knights, who've had the new coach bump since John Tortorella took over. Anaheim's been sliding, but if they can get back on it, maybe they've got a window here to go through the Pacific's its own thing. But McDavid looks to me like he's winning the scoring title, and could be another Hart Trophy that comes with that too.
I mean, as we're talking right now, he has 4 goals off Nathan McKinnon's lead at 51.
All right, now he's got 3 games left.
Yeah, but it's Connor McDavid. And one of those games are against the Canucks. There's a world he could do it. He could totally do it. He could totally jump Cole Caulfield and Nathan McKinnon. There's a world he could do it. Don't tell me it's not possible.
The odds are 3% or less.
No.
Yes.
If this was anybody else, I'd say that. At least bump
McKinnon
him up a
has
little
5
bit.
games left.
It's Connor McDavid, dude. Look, I'm not saying Connor McDavid should be the favorite. I've just learned not to completely dismiss any chance for Connor McDavid to do the unthinkable.
I got to say, I'm feeling a little for Caulfield, who's been stuck at 49 for a couple games. And
he'll get to 50. I'm not worried about it for him.
You say that, you never know. I mean, I remember the year that Austin Matthews couldn't miss. I think the last 3 games he stayed at 69 goals, and he had a ton of shots and couldn't get to 70. It's not a prediction. I'm just saying I really do hope he gets to 50. It could be once in a lifetime. It is a meaningful mark, and you can see the Canadians. I watched a couple of their games. They're looking for him out there, and he's getting his shots. But you can almost see it. I mean, what I love about Caulfield, he's such a determined player, but you can see his emotions are on his face, and I think he's definitely feeling the weight of it, as most people would. And I don't cheer for teams or anything like that in the league, but I would love to see him get to 50. And, I bet he'll put a nice celebration on it too.
Cole Caulfield has 4 games, including tonight against Tampa. And of course he has Saturday at home against Columbus. If it's not going to happen Thursday, it could very well happen on Saturday, a night where he has dominated all season.
That's right. Mr. Saturday Night.
Mr. Saturday Night, as they call him. CJ, before we get out of here, do you have a stick tap? I could go first if you need more time to think about it.
Dog ate my homework. You go first.
So his final broadcast on Hockey Night in Canada is this weekend. So there's no better time to give a stick tap to one Scott Oak. You have seen him for decades on the CBC on Hockey Night in Canada with his interviews, his work on games, Obviously, hockey players love him, not just because of the fact he gets to be on Hockey Night in Canada, because of the towels also he gets to give to players too. An absolute legend, a consummate professional. I'm glad I got to know him a little bit during my time in Alberta for 2 years. I tried to wish him congratulations a couple days ago, and he told me to stop contacting him at his phone number, to go through Sportsnet instead. I'm just kidding. He's kidding. He has that type of humor, and I really appreciated it. Thank you so much for everything you've given to the game, Scott Oak, and all the best in retirement.
Yeah, I'll double up on that. I was lucky to work with Scott for 4 years and be on the road with him and all those things. You're right. Dry sense of humor. Great guy, great broadcaster. And I think, probably even more importantly is the way he's honored his late son, Bruce's memory by creating addiction and mental health facilities in Winnipeg and raising a whole bunch of money for that, and his late wife as well. And so, he's the kind of person who's left an impact even beyond our sport, which is, impacting his community and, using his platform for positive things there. So, I love that he's going out kind of quietly. It's sort of like the Ovechkin, as we talked about earlier, exit for Scott. I bet if this was up to him, he would have just signed off Saturday night and been like, peace, by the way, I'm done. But,
I'm out.
But, bye. he gets a week of getting flowers, and that means he gets a stick tap from us on this Thursday.
Yeah. Okay. Do you still have one?
No, I was doubling up on that.
Piece? Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure. Sorry. Sometimes with these, usually with these stick taps, we do tend to double up on that, but it doesn't always happen. It's
a loud stick tap. It's two sticks pounding the pavement here for Scott Oak.
And well deserved for one, Scott Oak. Congratulations on a successful broadcasting career, and again, all the best in retirement. I think that's going to just about do it for our show. Get your questions in for Ask CJ for our Monday show. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. We'll talk to you all next week. Peace.
Last week of the season.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Hey, did you like the thing you just watched?
Was it hilarious?
Was it informative?
Was it me losing my mind?
Possibly. Potentially. Most of the time it is. Hey, listen, if you like what SDPN has to offer, you should check out more of our videos and subscribe to our channel by clicking subscribe, or Steve will find you.